There are warnings that echo loudly across history, and then there are those whispered so quietly that only the seekers, the ones who hunger for truth, ever hear them. Among the countless teachings attributed to Jesus, one stands apart, a final cryptic warning preserved not in the familiar pages of the New Testament, but in a text long hidden, dismissed, or forgotten by mainstream tradition. The Gospel of Thomas, saying 111, a single passage, a final message, a doorway, if you're willing to enter. But why did Jesus speak these words just before vanishing from the eyes of his disciples? Why did this teaching remain buried in the sands of Nag Hammadi for nearly 2 millennia, resurfacing only in 1945, as if waiting for a moment when humanity would once again be ready? Today, we decode this mysterious saying, a warning about the illusions of the world, the fragility of time, and the urgency of awakening. A message that doesn't beg to be believed, only understood. Because Thomas 111 isn't simply a quote, it's a key, one capable of unlocking the ancient psychology of enlightenment. In this video, you'll journey through the forgotten historical and mystical context behind the Gospel of Thomas, the hidden meaning of Jesus' final warning, the symbolic language he used, and why it matters now more than ever. And most importantly, how this message can transform your life, perception, and spiritual path. We'll explore why this teaching was suppressed, how it challenges the foundations of conventional belief, and what it reveals about the nature of reality itself. So prepare yourself, not for a sermon, not for a story, but for a revelation that invites you to step beyond the surface of the world, into the realm where truth and illusion meet. This is the warning Jesus gave right before he disappeared. And today, you'll finally understand why. To understand the weight of Jesus' final warning in Thomas 111, we must first step backward, far beyond the boundaries of what most people consider biblical history, and into a world where mysticism, philosophy, and oral tradition blended into something far more complex than what modern eyes typically perceive. Picture the ancient Near East in the 1st century, a crossroads of ideas, empires, and spiritual quests. It was a time when Greek philosophy collided with Hebrew mysticism, when Egyptian esoteric schools lingered in the shadows of fading temples, and when seekers from every corner of the Mediterranean carried fragments of hidden wisdom. Into this tapestry walked Jesus, a figure whose words were not merely teachings, but keys encoded in layers of symbol, metaphor, and paradox. The Gospel of Thomas, unlike the canonical Gospels, doesn't present a narrative of miracles, journeys, or public ministry. Instead, it offers a collection of 114 sayings, mysterious, compact, and uncompromising. These sayings are not meant to be read like stories. They are meant to be decoded, meditated upon, lived. In many ancient esoteric traditions, truth was not handed directly to the student. It was veiled, requiring maturity of consciousness to unfold. The Gospel of Thomas follows that lineage. Historically, this text was likely circulating alongside the earliest Christian writings, possibly even predating some of the New Testament books. Yet, it vanished from history for nearly 1,600 years, preserved only in fragments and whispers. Why? Because Thomas speaks to a different kind of Christianity, inward, introspective, transformative. It bypasses institutions and intermediaries, placing the responsibility of awakening squarely on the individual. This was a radical idea, and still is. Thomas 111, in particular, carries the tone of finality. It reads almost like a departing message, a caution given at the threshold between presence and disappearance. To the disciples who followed Jesus, this moment would have felt like the edge of a cliff. Everything they knew was about to change. And so, he gives them a warning that is less about danger and more about perception. A message about the world as illusion, about the inevitability of instability, about the fleeting nature of the physical realm. The philosophical context is equally profound. Many ancient schools, from Stoicism to Gnosticism to Hermeticism, taught that the visible world is only a shadow of a deeper reality. They believed that suffering arises not from events themselves, but from misinterpreting the nature of existence. Jesus' warning in Thomas aligns with this ancient worldview, that the world is a shifting structure, a temporary construct that should not be mistaken for ultimate truth. And yet, this message was often deemed too mystical, too liberating, too uncontainable for organized religion. A teaching that encourages people to see through the world's illusion can be dangerous, especially for systems built on conformity, not inner discovery. For this reason, the Gospel of Thomas was not canonized. It slipped into obscurity, buried in the sands of Egypt, shielded from time, until humanity was ready to ask deeper questions again. Today, as people search for meaning beyond dogma and tradition, these forgotten words resurface with striking clarity. They resonate because they speak directly to the human experience, the instability of life, the illusions we cling to, and the urgency to awaken before everything we depend on collapses. Only by understanding this profound context can we truly grasp the depth of Jesus' final warning. To enter the heart of Thomas 111, we must begin not with the words themselves, but with the experience they were pointing toward. Imagine the disciples gathered around Jesus in a moment, thick with unspoken tension. They sensed change approaching, something final, something irreversible. Every word suddenly carried the weight of departure. And then, he gives them this warning. The heavens and the earth will roll up in your presence, and he who lives from the living one will see neither death nor fear. Does not Jesus say, "Whoever has found himself, of him, the world is not worthy"? At first glance, it sounds poetic, cryptic, even unsettling. But beneath the metaphor lies a spiritual psychology so precise, so disruptive, that it continues to challenge seekers today. Let's begin with the opening line. The heavens and the earth will roll up in your presence. This is not a prediction of cosmic destruction. It is a metaphor for perception, an awakening so profound that the fundamental framework through which one sees the world collapses. In ancient mysticism, heaven and earth represented the totality of the visible and invisible world, the entire structure of human understanding. To say they will roll up is to say your old worldview will be dismantled. The illusions you cling to will fold away like a scroll. This is the first layer of Jesus' warning. Everything you think is stable, solid, or absolute is temporary, and awakening will reveal this with shocking clarity. The disciples, like most people, lived with certain assumptions that the world around them was fixed, that life followed predictable patterns, that meaning came from external structures. Jesus warns them that once they awaken, these assumptions will unravel. The heavens and the earth are not literal planets or skies. They are the inner architecture of belief. Then comes the second line, equally powerful. And he who lives from the living one will see neither death nor fear. This is not a denial of physical death. Jesus is pointing to a state of consciousness in which death loses its power, not because the body becomes immortal, but because identity shifts from the body to the eternal essence within. Ancient traditions called this essence the spirit, the self, the Atman, the divine spark. Jesus calls it the living one, the source. To live from the living one is to anchor your awareness in this inner, imperishable reality. It is to awaken to the part of yourself untouched by time, circumstance, or decay. And in that recognition, fear dissolves. Death becomes a transition, not an ending. Life becomes expression, not survival. This is the second layer of his warning. If you awaken, you will discover a dimension of yourself that cannot die. But such a discovery demands courage. It requires the willingness to let go of every identity built on illusion. And then, the final blow. Whoever has found himself, of him, the world is not worthy. This is the paradox at the core of spiritual awakening. When you truly know yourself, not the personality, not the ego, not the roles you play, but the essence beneath, something extraordinary happens. The world's values no longer define you. Success, failure, praise, rejection, wealth, status, they lose their hypnotic power. This doesn't mean the world rejects the awakened person. It means the awakened person no longer depends on the world for validation. They cannot be manipulated through fear or desire. They become inwardly free and therefore ungovernable by illusion. This is the third and final layer of Jesus' warning in part 1. Awakening separates you from the world, not physically, but psychologically. The world of illusion cannot hold you once you know who you truly are. So Jesus offers this final message not as a threat, but as preparation. He is saying, "When I disappear from your eyes, you will be forced to discover the truth within yourselves. And when you do, the world you knew will collapse, not in destruction, but in revelation." Thomas 1:11 is not a prophecy of doom. It is a roadmap to liberation. To understand the deeper meaning behind Jesus' warning in Thomas 111, we must step beyond the surface interpretation and enter the realm where paradox becomes the only language capable of holding truth. Because the Gospel of Thomas was never meant to be read linearly. It's a labyrinth, a mirror, a set of riddles designed to awaken a particular state of consciousness. In part 1, we explored the outer shell of the message. Now we move into the inner chamber. Let's begin with the phrase, "The heavens and the earth will roll up in your presence." There is an important nuance here. Jesus does not say they will roll up after you awaken, or because of your awakening. He says it will happen in your presence. In other words, the collapse of illusion isn't a future event. It occurs whenever true presence is activated. Presence is not merely attention. It is a state of being where the mind stops projecting, interpreting, and defending the self-image. It is pure awareness. Ancient mystics across cultures describe this state identically. The moment one becomes fully present, the world constructed by thought dissolves. The rolling up of heaven and earth is the unraveling of the mental universe we assumed was real. Now notice the next phrase, "He who lives from the living one." This is a shift from perception to source. To live from something means to draw your identity, strength, and purpose from it. Jesus contrasts two ways of living. Living from the world, which means living from fear, desire, and external validation. Living from the living one, which means living from the inner, eternal essence. This is where the hidden paradox reveals itself. The more you cling to the world, the more unstable it becomes. The more you release your dependence on the world, the more grounded you become. This is not philosophy, it's psychology. When we define ourselves by things outside our control, our inner world becomes fragile. But when we root ourselves in what cannot be taken from us, awareness, presence, consciousness, we become free. Now consider the final line again. Whoever has found himself, of him, the world is not worthy. This is the most misunderstood part of the saying. Many assume it means the awakened person becomes superior, elevated above others. But in esoteric traditions, the world refers not to people nor to nature. It refers to the collective dream, the web of illusions woven by culture, ego, and conditioning. So, the meaning becomes: once someone awakens to their true nature, the illusions of the world can no longer contain them. It echoes the Hermetic principle: as within, so without. It mirrors the Upanishadic teaching: the self is beyond the world. It resonates with the Buddha's final insight: in the knowing, the world is undone. Across traditions, awakening always comes with this consequence: the dissolution of false identity. Another layer of Thomas 111 involves the idea of disappearance. In many mystical narratives, the teacher disappears physically when the student becomes ready to see inwardly. Jesus' warning can be interpreted as preparing the disciples for this shift. The outer teacher fades so that the inner teacher can be found. It's a symbolic death. Jesus withdraws from their senses so a deeper presence can arise within them. What rolls up is not heaven and earth themselves, but the need for external guidance. Another aspect rarely discussed is the psychological cost of awakening. When Jesus says, "The world is not worthy," he's also acknowledging the loneliness that often accompanies inner transformation. The awakened individual perceives reality differently, sometimes so drastically that the old social structures feel alien. This is not rejection, it's misalignment. The world of illusion and the world of truth do not communicate in the same language. And here lies the hidden warning. Awakening is liberating, but not always comfortable. It requires releasing what once felt familiar. Fear dissolves, yes. Illusion collapses, yes. But identity must also be surrendered, and this surrender can feel like a death of its own. Yet Jesus frames this not as a tragedy, but as a birth, a transition, the moment when the seeker becomes the seer. Thomas 111 is not simply about cosmic collapse. It is about the psychological collapse of the false self and the emergence of the true one. Up to this point, we've explored the mystical, symbolic, and philosophical layers of Jesus' final warning. But the ancient sages never intended these teachings to remain abstract. Every esoteric message, no matter how cosmic in tone, was meant to be practiced, lived, embodied, tested in the furnace of daily experience. Thomas 111 is no exception. If the heavens and the earth will roll up in your presence, the question becomes, how do we cultivate this presence? How do we loosen our grip on illusion, anchor ourselves in the living one, and discover the self that the world is not worthy of owning? Let's explore 3 practical approaches that align with the heart of this teaching. 1. The practice of radical presence isn't simply being mindful. It is the conscious act of stepping out of thought and into awareness. Here's a simple technique: the 3-second return. Wherever you are, pause. Take 1 slow breath. Notice 3 sensory details: a sound, a color, a sensation. Ask inwardly, who is the one experiencing this moment? Don't answer with words, just feel the awareness behind the question. This tiny practice collapses the mental world, even briefly. It allows a glimpse of the state Jesus described, where the structure of illusion rolls up and the real world, the inner world, reveals itself. Do this several times a day, especially when overwhelmed, distracted, or pulled into emotional reaction. Over time, it trains the mind to release its constant fabrication and return to the living one within. 2. Letting go of external identity. Jesus' statement that whoever has found himself, of him the world is not worthy, points to a powerful spiritual discipline. Detach from roles. not responsibilities. You still show up in life, parent, partner, worker, creator, but you no longer believe these roles define who you are. Try this reflection. Write down the roles you play in life. Beside each role, write, "This is what I do, not what I am." Now ask, who am I without these labels? You don't need a verbal answer. The silence that follows is the doorway Jesus points to. That silence is the living one. This practice loosens the grip of the world, its judgments, expectations, and illusions, and allows your deeper identity to rise naturally. 3. Rewriting the fear of death. The line, "He who lives from the living one will see neither death nor fear," is a teaching about identity, not immortality. A simple exercise to align with this truth is the inner witness practice. When you experience fear, any fear, observe it as if it belongs to someone else. Ask, what is aware of this fear? Is the awareness itself afraid? You'll notice something subtle. Fear arises within you, but it is not you. You are the awareness that sees it. Repeat this often enough, and a profound shift occurs. The grip of fear loosens. The world loses its power to intimidate. The illusion of death becomes exactly that, an illusion. Daily integration, a simple ritual. Each morning, sit for 2 minutes and affirm inwardly, "I live from the living one." Feel it, not as belief, but as a returning. This simple ritual reorients your consciousness away from the unstable world and toward the inner source Jesus spoke of. Practicing even one of these techniques consistently will begin to dissolve the inner heaven and earth you once mistook for reality. You will feel the shift, not dramatically at first, but quietly, fundamentally. A new stability emerges, a new clarity, a new sense of self. And this is the beginning of discovering the truth Jesus left behind as his final warning. As we come to the end of this exploration, reflect for a moment on how the message of Thomas 111 now feels compared to when you first heard it. What once appeared as a cryptic, almost otherworldly warning has unfolded into a roadmap, one that points not toward apocalypse, but toward awakening, not toward fear, but toward freedom. Jesus' final message in the Gospel of Thomas is not merely a fragment of ancient wisdom. It is a mirror held up to every seeker. It reminds us that the world we cling to, its expectations, its illusions, its shifting structures, is never as solid as it seems. It can roll up at any moment, and often does. But this collapse is not a loss. It is a revelation. The true danger has never been the instability of the world. The true danger is forgetting who you are within it. When Jesus speaks of living from the living one, he invites us into a deeper identity, one untouched by time, unshaken by change, and unafraid of loss. He calls us to discover the awareness behind the name, the presence behind the personality, the essence behind the roles we play. And when he says that whoever has found himself, of him, the world is not worthy. He is not elevating the awakened individual above others. He is declaring that once you know your true nature, the illusions of the world can no longer claim you. You become free in the most profound sense, inwardly untouchable, spiritually uncontainable. This is the meaning of his final warning. This is the gift hidden in his disappearance. Now, the question is yours to answer. What have you been mistaking for solid ground? And who are you when all the illusions roll away? Before you go, reflect on these teachings. Share your insights in the comments. Let your voice become part of the conversation. And if you feel called to continue this journey into ancient wisdom and inner awakening, subscribe and step with me into the next mystery waiting to be uncovered. Because the hidden sayings are far from finished.